everybody, Armando and Ashley here from Mondo's Exotic Zoo, and we're back for another episode of the TortCast. This time we got Cherryheads. So, first we're going to start talking about redfoot tortoises in general. So redfoot tortoises are Shelenoidus carbonaria. Okay? The Shelenoidus carbonaria, redfoot tortoise, is generally going to be a blackish, brownish tortoise here with the caramel colorations in there. They're going to have like a yellowish belly and a red head, red on the limbs. As they get older, sometimes they'll turn yellow. When they're babies, it's red. They're going to be like a medium-sized tortoise. They'll get like 12 to 14 inches. And then there's different localities. So for example here, this is an example of a Colombian locality. They got yellow coloration on the head and on the limbs. And they've got this exclamation point on their bottom there.
Super cool.
So that's the Colombians there. But what we're focusing on today is the cherryheads. So your cherryhead tortoises, they come from Brazil and they're a smaller locality. So Ace here is going on 4 years now?
Yeah, going on 4 years.
Going on 4 years old. And here you can see he's a not very big tortoise. He's like 6, maybe 7 inches long. I'd say 6 inches long. And still a pretty small guy. And then Kiki, she's more of the desirable coloration for cherryheads. A lot of the Brazilian cherryheads are gonna have this marbling, and that's like a real desirable trait in the cherryheads. And she used to not have any at all, and then suddenly she got so beautiful. And this little tiny one, this is Lechuga. Lechuga is as old as Kiki there. Same age. We got them at the same time. Same age. And you can see the giant size difference there. Some cherryheads just stay exceptionally small.
It's going to be my mini cherryhead line. So what's up next? What they like to do?
So you'll find them a lot of times, like they're from, the way I describe it is like the redfoots, because there's yellowfoots that are also from the same area. The redfoots like are from outside of the forest, on the outside. So they're gonna spend a lot of time like in the canopies. They'll go and find water. They'll spend a lot of time soaking. These guys, they love to soak. When their water dishes are filled up, they all go run into it and soak. When we have their tortoise sauna set up, they love going in there and spending time in there. And you'll just find them soaking all the time. That's what they love to do. And then when they're not doing that, they're running around looking for food and looking for things to do.
Okay, well, they're looking for food, so what do they like to eat?
So redfoot tortoises are an omnivorous type of tortoise. They're gonna eat. What I mean by that, they're gonna eat a little bit of protein. So that's a little bit different than most tortoises. You'll find them in nature eating like dead animals they might come across and things like that. They'll eat insects. If you keep them outside, they might eat some insects and stuff like that. So that you can feed them like eggs and things like that to give them a little bit of protein. You give them mushrooms. Mushrooms are something you generally wouldn't feed to like a grassland tortoise, but you could give them to redfoots. Yeah, they love mushrooms. They go running for it.
So you always talk about how they go running for it. So like, how do they like act? Like when we're in there, you know, when we have food, I read that they, you know, are very community-like. They're really smart. They like to come and eat. Is there anything else cool about how they like to act that makes them so special?
Yeah, they're just a really interactive tortoise. They'll come running to you and checking you out, seeing if you brought food to them or what you're doing in there. They're so strong. He's holding on to me with his one leg right there.
Yeah. See if Pablo will do it. Yeah, see?
Yeah. It's funny how strong they are. They're really good climbers and things like that. So you keep them outdoors. You really need to make sure they can't climb out of their enclosure.
So you keep saying outdoors. So there's different ways to keep tortoises. Outside is one way. How would you keep a tortoise outside?
Yeah.
Or
So
specifically,
the best way to keep these guys is outside if you can. And luckily, we live in Florida, and we have our house these last few months. So we're getting ready in the next couple of months to start building some outdoor enclosures for the first time. And so, well, besides our ponds, but some outdoor tortoise enclosures. So we're gonna build kind of like an aviary type enclosure. And it's gonna be like really big for them, probably like 20 by 10 or something like that. So that'll be a nice size enclosure. And potentially along the way we might keep them with our iguanas, but that's down the way. Kenan does that. He has like tortoises with his rhino iguanas and his Cuban iguanas, so we think that would be pretty cool. So, but that's down the way. So yeah, we're gonna keep them in like a 20 by 10 like aviary type enclosure with like we're gonna do like concrete on the walls and stuff on the outside, and have something else on the inside so they don't rub against it. But that's a whole different story. Most people, like when you have a baby, you're gonna raise them up like on paper towels and things like that for the first like couple months to get bigger, just so they don't ingest any substrate. And then after that, we'll keep them with like sphagnum moss and reptisoil and things like that. And in different totes, we always use different sized totes and keep upgrading as they get bigger. And then we'll cut in a second to their enclosure that we keep them in here. So here's our enclosure. We've shown it in plenty of videos before. We have a video of us making the whole thing. This is what we're keeping them in for now until we get them outside. So here's some of our guys walking around. And we have a few different dishes in here where we keep them with water, and they get them all muddied up throughout the day and we have to change them. We just fed them, so there's some lettuce lying around and different things lying around. So in terms of enrichment as well, like we talked about in the TortCast, this is one of the ways that you do it. You spread out their food for them instead of just putting it in one spot, and they'll run around and they'll get to engage in their natural foraging behaviors and walk around and find their food. And then we don't have our tortoise sauna set up yet still, so we have that just hanging down in the back, and back there it gets nice and humid for them. So this is how we keep ours, and then we'll get back to the TortCast. And you'll see it's a 4 foot by 6 foot enclosure that we have laid out in there. We made a video about it as well, our Tortoise Room enclosure. So it's part of a much bigger, it's part of a 10 by 6 enclosure that's split up into different enclosures. And so theirs is a 4 by 6 area, and we have some water dishes in there for them to soak. And we have like a little tarp in the back where it's nice and dark and they can go back there and hide. We have to get their tortoise sauna put back in there and get that going for them. They love that.
That's awesome. So, difficulty of care, would you say, for a tortoise? Someone saying, hey, I want to get a tortoise, how difficult can they be?
They're like generally pretty easy, but the hardest part really is humidity, keeping the right humidity. Our first tortoise, Ace, we had him in a screen top enclosure. Well, first we had him in a screen top enclosure, and there was no humidity in there. It just goes right out the top. We had him on like coconut chips because the person told us to use coconut chips, and it just wasn't holding humidity at all. And he eventually developed a respiratory infection, and so that was not fun. We had to take him to the vet, spent a lot of money on that. And then I learned how to do like closed chamber enclosures, which is more like with the totes, I'd cut the front open, and then I'd put some, plastic wrap on the front, and I would tape it, and then I'd have the lid on it. and it would make a closed chamber enclosure. So then they'd have nice humidity, and that's the best way for raising them up when they're little. So you get nice smooth tortoises like ours, and it works really well, and that keeps the humidity up. But if you understand that, you know how to make like a closed chamber enclosure, you know how to give them their proper humidity, then they're pretty easy. They're pretty hardy tortoises. It helps that you can feed them all different kind of things. So that's nice compared to like a sulcata or a leopard tortoise where you gotta grow all these all these different like leaves and stuff for them, all these different mixes you can buy online and grow for them.
That's pretty cool. And I know upfront costs, a lot of people don't realize if you're keeping your tortoise in general inside, what kind of lighting do they need?
Yeah, so you're going to need like UVB lighting. They use a 5.0 UVB lighting. It's a little bit lower since they're from like I said, a forest area. The trees are going to be cutting off some of that UVB. So they use the 5.0 UVB. And then you're going to have to buy them like heat lamps. We give them a different range in heat from like 90 degrees up to maybe 100. And then different things in between there. You want them to have a cool side in the 70s, stuff like that, so they could cool down and just thermoregulate themselves.
Perfect, awesome. And then I know I soak them once to twice a week depending on the age. Can you give a little bit more reason why we soak them?
Yeah, you want to make sure they're staying hydrated. They're going to get a lot of hydration from their food if you're feeding them a proper diet. But also the heat lamps can sometimes dry them out, especially in a smaller size enclosure. It could dry them out. And so you really want to keep them hydrated. It keeps them growing smooth, keeps them healthy and looking nice.
Well, we have a couple questions that were asked. So one of the questions from the watermelon teacher, she asked, well, what are their names? And like, why did we name them what they were?
So this is Ace. I named him Ace because he was my first tortoise. And I don't know, that's the name I chose. It was between Ace and Vader, and I did a vote on Facebook actually, and everyone chose Ace. I was hoping for Vader.
That's cute.
So that's our first one. This is Kiki, and I bought Kiki and Lechuga at the same time. And it was one for Ashley, one for my little sister Alexa. And Alexa named Kiki. And that was when the Drake song was popular. And yeah, so we always used to sing to her. Yeah, so she's used to jamming. And then Lechuga, I don't know. Ashley named her Lechuga.
Is it like lettuce?
I was not for it.
It's cute.
Yeah, so I just let Ashley do what she wants.
That's awesome. And then from our last video, Lewis was asking, what do we do for enrichment?
Yeah, so the enrichment, I kind of mentioned it in our little clip when I go off and show you their enclosure. But that's going to be like mainly with their feeding. Like instead of just giving them a plate with their food right in one spot, I like to spread it out everywhere, all over their enclosure, all over the perimeter, all over the middle. And I just spread it out and they can run around and forage and just do their natural behavior, which would be walking around and eating a little bit here, a little bit there. And yeah, that's the main thing that I like to do for them. Alright everybody, I hope you enjoyed our TortCast. And stay tuned for the next one. We keep on practicing and get better and better every time. Thanks everybody.
Thanks guys.